You know, that wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it a step too far to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. That performances was just lacked that intensity.
OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day, and every week we're giving away a Gillette Labs shaving kit. To be with a chance of winning one, just let us know who you think should make the performance rankings. The best place to enter is on the Off The Ball Instagram page. You'll see the comments box in our story, which is put up generally every Sunday night. And Nathan, you're taking us through the red to the green this morning. We're starting in the red, and just a couple of other golf things to tie up. The LIV Tour performances over the course of the weekend, not great.
Well, we're just bringing you the latest instalment of the worldwide smear campaign against the LIV Golf Tour, and they're in the red in the performance rankings. It wasn't a good weekend for the LIV Golf Tour players. Dustin Johnson, the only one inside the top 25. He may well have been the only one inside the top 50. Phil Mickelson finishing up on 11 over par, and nobody really doing anything else that had played in that first tournament in London. Not helped again, I think, by comments from Gray McDowell, who maybe was having a few cold beers on Saturday night, but decided to start responding to a lot of tweets when he was being asked about LIV Golf and what's going on there. And he basically implied that, listen, this is a smear campaign. Once we get through the smear campaign, all of this will just be fine, which is another remarkable doubling down from Gray McDowell. I cannot believe how he has ended up positioning himself as the voice and as the face of LIV Golf and Saudi Arabian investment in golf, but he is all in on this. Another interesting part was when he was sort of referring to it's only going to get bigger and stronger, and it is. And while LIV Golf may well be in the red right now, I think the high of the last couple of weeks of golf, of McIlroy at the Canadian Open, of Fitzpatrick last night at the US Open, I don't think it'll bother LIV Golf too much, because all the rumours are that over the next 2 weeks we're going to have basically a day-by-day drip feed of superstars moving to the LIV Golf Tour. Abraham Ancer, the Mexican player who is a top 30 in the world player, due to be announced today that he's going. There's a huge amount of speculation around Colin Morikawa. Now, it seems to be based off one interview where he was somewhat non-committal, but it was done on the week of the US Open, and it may well have been just more, I don't want to be distracted by this sort of thing right now. But there's a lot more players going to end up playing in the first tournament in Portland, Oregon, the week after next. And we could end up with somewhere 18 of the world's top 50, and then you have a proper divide in golf, and you don't get many tournaments like you got at the US Open. So on the course, I think a bad week for LIV Golf, and right now when they're playing a very shortened schedule of 8 tournaments, I think that'll change as they get more players. I think they have the funds to extend this to 14, 20 tournaments, whatever they need. But are these golfers, are they going to be coming into these events in peak condition if they're not playing against the best players in the world? But what LIV Golf will say is, well, we're going to have the very best players in the world soon.
Dublin's Fair City has been in touch to say, since golf has gone behind the Sky paywall, I'm sure many people have lost all interest in the game. So there's, taking that point into account is kind of like the floating voter view of golf, and I guess the fact that there may not be a whole pile of people who can still be attracted to the game. Does what happened at the weekend change your perception of how successful LIV Golf will be? Does it recapture the soul of those people who are kind of on the fence about golf in all its forms, thinking that we can get entertainment week in, week out on a Sunday night when we have players of Fitzpatrick's quality and Zalatoris' quality going toe to toe?
I think maybe we underestimate how good golf can be at the top professional level and quickly forget about the drama that it brings you on a Sunday night. But I don't think what happened last night will make any difference to the LIV Golf Tour and their plans and how it will develop. Everybody was on this massive high last Sunday night when McIlroy won the Canadian Open against Justin Thomas and Tony Finau. The PGA Tour couldn't have dreamt it up, and then McIlroy makes a smart remark about Greg Norman, and then this week you back it up with a great US Open. We don't know what's going to happen with the LIV Tour and the majors. Will they be allowed back in next year? Will they come to some sort of a compromise? Who knows? But the LIV Golf Tour, they aren't working on emotion here. They're working on hard numbers, and the numbers are just getting bigger and bigger for the best players in the world. So if you are losing an Abraham Ancer, if you're losing even the likes of Adam Scott, Bryson DeChambeau is gone now, Patrick Reed is gone, Brooks Koepka's brother's already playing there. Is Brooks Koepka got a loyalty to the PGA Tour? Brooks Koepka has been one of those who always wanted to play less golf and never had any great interest in the run-of-the-mill golf tournament. So while the PGA Tour is absolutely winning on the emotional stakes, in cold hard cash, they cannot compete with LIV.
Yeah, for sure. We'll come back to the golf in just a moment, because in the amber is Rory McIlroy. Just one other thing in the red this morning are the Cork hurlers. The angle on this, I guess, is the fact that
they were beaten on.
Well, they definitely did lose a game of hurling on Saturday. You think that it's all doom and gloom for Cork?
Maybe not in the long term, but it does feel as though it's the end of the Kieran Kingston era. He was non-committal after the match. It was a game they never really looked like winning. They missed a huge amount of chances in the first half. It was a 12 wides in the first half. How was Pat Horgan on the pitch? Whatever about form, anything else, you're just thinking an All-Ireland quarter-final, what he gives you from the place ball, at the very least. If he was on one leg, you'd have him out there, just because you know he is going to be so consistent. And he's brought on at half-time, which seems like an admission that they got this wrong, but I could not believe it when I saw that Cork starting 15 and he wasn't in there, and there seemed to be a few questionable selection decisions. Obviously, after the round robin, there was, it looked like they were dead and buried at one stage in the round robin, and we were talking on this show about Kieran Kingston's last game in charge. But yeah, I think they sort of went out with a bit of a whimper. Galway never fully pulled clear, so always sort of kept them in it, but it just didn't look as though Cork were going to win this. What are we, 2005, heading towards 20 years? Or 2005, sorry. So heading towards 20 years since Cork last won a hurling All-Ireland. I think that gets them in the red, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. Like, it's just, there's always kind of this expectation of Cork, which feels, or it has felt in the past, as if it's like beyond what they should be achieving. This idea that Cork have a right to be, not a right, but an expectation to be in the winners' enclosure or close to it almost every single year. I guess we're reaching a point soon where that expectation is absolutely fair enough. When you look at some of the underage success they've had over the last couple of years, you'd have to think now, next year, the year after, that if they're not like one of the top two teams in the country, then there will be questions asked about that talent line and converting underage success into top tier success.
Well, it's not easy. Like that has been a challenge for many teams in many different codes through the years. It feels as though they also need a philosophy change, that like their scene has been soft. All of the previews that I've heard were, well, if Galway come with a physicality, Cork just won't be able to deal with them, and that's not how you want to be going into championship matches. That they need to be able to play a running game, a free-flowing sort of game, and like that's not going to get you to be one of the top two teams in the country. Like Limerick have both. Like they can play whatever way they want, and nobody is ever going to match them in the physicality stakes. So, to be beaten in an All-Ireland quarter-final, to go from that to suddenly becoming one of the top two teams in the country, it feels like quite a jump. It'll be interesting to see what they do next, who they look for. Do they stay internal? I know a lot of people feel that Eddie Brennan, who's coming up, maybe should be a contender and they should look outside. It doesn't feel as though that's going to happen. Maybe Pat Ryan gets it. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting winter, no doubt, in Cork. Yeah, like you talk about the physicality, like one of the kind of defining images of Saturday is, Burke's shoulder. There's some disagreement as to whether or not it was shoulder to shoulder to helmet. There was no real intent, but that, for me, when I saw that, I was like, oh, Jesus, that's like that Galway full back line showing to Cork what they can do. And they'll probably do that in the next round as well. They're probably going to be more physical than most of the people they come up against. And then also, you've got that Conor Whelan goal where he manages to just get inside his man, hold him off back of the net. There's a real physicality about Galway which is going to be commended and will probably give them a chance against Limerick. And like I think a couple of years ago when we were talking about the teams who were best placed to topple Limerick, I think a lot of people still would have had Galway in there because of the players that they have, and Cork probably just aren't at that level. The thing is, not a whole pile of things would have needed to go different for them in the first half in particular for them to be in a commanding position in that game. And like in isolation, Saturday will be a really, really hard one to take for Cork. It's just how deep the questions will actually go over the next little while as to where the problems are for Cork, because I think it does come back to this idea that Cork, or the feeling is that they should be close to the top two every single year. On the other side of things, they were both poor enough hurling quarter-finals, I think it's fair to say, but both second halves, I thought anyway, absolutely lit up. And the Clare game was just incredible. Like, I think there was a real
sense of caution. Like I was chatting to Mick in the office on Friday about everybody talking Clare up ahead of this game against Wexford at the weekend, and when you start talking them up and you look at Wexford, I guess, coming in on the back of a win, Clare coming in on the back of an extra time defeat, a heartbreaking defeat, there was always a chance that they could have got caught a little bit flat-footed, and it so nearly happened. And I just can't make my mind up as to what the narrative is going to be. What will the truth around Clare be when we get to the All-Ireland semi-final weekend? Will it be that, you know, Wexford almost beat them and Wexford wouldn't be considered one of the All-Ireland favourites, therefore Clare cannot be considered one of the All-Ireland favourites? Or is it that Clare were really bad for a lot of the game and still won in a classic second half All-Ireland hurling quarter-final, and therefore will absolutely get to a higher level against Kilkenny, potentially knock them out and potentially make it to an All-Ireland final? One of those two things is not true, and it's very, very hard to put your finger on what the case is with Clare at the moment. You would have to say, though, that Tony Kelly can't play so bad for 70 minutes again. I know he was brilliant for the last quarter, but for first half of hurling, he won't be as bad again. You can definitely point to some of the substitutes they brought on, Aaron Shanaher, Shane Meehan, to live wire forwards that'll inject Kilkenny with plenty of worry deep in the second half, regardless of how that game is going. And personally, if I had to guess, if I had to take a stab in the dark, I would lean towards the Clare team that played against Limerick a couple of times, the Clare team that did finish second in Munster, the team that some people think is the second best team in Munster, and I think that's going to be a hell of a semi-final.
That old cliche of semi-finals are there to be won felt like that with quarter-finals. It didn't look like it was about performance really for any of the four teams. It was just about somehow scrapping away through to an All-Ireland semi-final, having a little bit of break, regather yourself. I was still surprised by just how poor Clare were at times. We had Jamesy O'Connor on the show on Thursday night, and he sort of predicted exactly what was going to happen. And I was surprised by the sort of doom and gloom and negativity that surrounded Clare, because yes, there was a heartbreaking element, absolutely, to the manner of the Munster final defeat. But I thought that they got so close to one of the all-time great teams. The confidence that they would take from that and should take from that would actually mean it was a quick enough recovery, and they would think, we want Limerick again. We want to face them in an All-Ireland final because we know we're not that far off them. But it did seem that maybe mentally they were somewhat crushed by the Munster final defeat and really struggled to get back up. But when it really mattered, they came through. They absolutely came through, and now they do have a good time to regroup, and it's a long time since they played Kilkenny in a championship clash. But I think on what we've seen from the two so far this year, you would have Clare as favourites going into that semi-final. If
Limerick win the other semi-final, I'm pretty happy with whoever comes through the other one, because I want to see Clare against Limerick again. I think that'll be, we know that'll be a good All-Ireland hurling final because of what they've already shown this year. But I also want to see Limerick against Kilkenny again, and I think the neutral observer out there is probably more drawn to Clare. I'm not sure if I'm right in that, but I kind of feel that they're a more neutrally attractive team because so many people have seen Kilkenny win so many All-Irelands down through the years. But I actually wonder if Kilkenny in that final could be just as good a prospect as Clare versus Limerick, because we go back to 2019, the last time Limerick were beaten, it was Kilkenny who undid them. It was Brian Cody who did a job on Limerick that day, and I just wonder, could he do something similar to them again? And it'll be very, very, very interesting to see how Limerick prepare for Brian Cody again in a knockout championship game. Of course, we're completely writing Galway out of the picture there and Henry Shefflin, but I think that's probably the least likely of the two scenarios to happen for an underdog to win is Galway knocking Limerick out.
Yeah, and listen, if Limerick are beaten at any stage this season, it's going to be an enormous shock, it feels, at this stage. But a Kilkenny-Galway final would obviously have its massive attractions as well. Would there have ever been a bigger sideshow going into any All-Ireland final than Cody and Shefflin? If somehow they were to end up meeting, I think it's highly unlikely to happen. I still think I'd like to see Clare back in the final against Limerick. I just was so impressed with them in that Munster final. I kind of thought that Limerick were cruising through Munster and that there wasn't a huge amount to read into the first game, but they backed it up, and a Tony Kelly in an All-Ireland final with a chance to put in one of the all-time great performances and take down this Limerick side would be pretty appetising. Dennis Ryan has been in touch to say the standard of goalkeeping in Thurles, Limerick will canter to 3 in a row. That is definitely an outcome that is realistic, that Limerick do canter through the last 2 games, but we're hoping that they're going to get 2 wars before they actually have to lift 3 in a row, and the standard of goalkeeping is definitely poor. On Saturday that might have been in the red. Richard Redball says Wexford hurling should be in both the red sections. He's obviously pointed towards more of a Wexford collapse than a Clare comeback, it seems, on Saturday. And Dublin's Fair City has been back in touch to say Tip versus Galway minor yesterday was the best entertainment on offer.
I've seen Shane Brophy, I think it was, saying that it was one of the best minor games he's ever seen. Comco Productions, meanwhile, says Rory wasn't close all through day 3 and day 4. Too many mistakes, but he will definitely win another major. And that brings us nicely onto the Amber, Nathan.
Yeah, I think Amber sums up perfectly where Rory McIlroy is. There was an awful lot to like about his performance over the weekend. But ultimately, it's another major gone that he didn't win when he is in red-hot form. And his attitude seemed to be as good as it's been over the last 8 years. And he put himself in a brilliant position heading into the weekend. Putting as well as he's ever putted. His wedge play has massively improved over the past few months. But ultimately, his driving let him down over the weekend. And not just over the weekend, he was constantly scrapping, even on the first couple of days. He was just holding so many putts. It meant that there wasn't as much of a premium on his driving. But you felt if he was to contend over the weekend, he would have to improve off the tee. And his miss left cost him again and again and again, right from the opening tee shot on the third round. And because of that, he just wasn't really a factor. We thought if he sorted that out, that he was putting so well. But all of his putts, and so many of his putts, were for par. Like even going back to Friday and the near calamity when he had the double bogey, like he holds this monster putt for double bogey at that stage. He just wasn't giving himself enough birdie opportunities, and the mental strain that must put on you, where hole after hole you're having a 15, 20 footer for par. That's difficult to sustain, and quite simply he couldn't drive it as badly and as poorly as he did yesterday and really get himself into contention. But I just think there's been such a change in his attitude and his outlook, it feels, over the past few weeks. He really does seem to be relishing being the guy leading the good side of golf right now, and being that leader, and has taken that in his shoulders. And I think it suits him being that player and having the elbows out and taking on Greg Norman. And he's going to St Andrews, where he has mixed emotions. You think back to 2010, his one and only Open Championship appearance at St Andrews, shoots 63 in the first round, gets these horrible weather conditions on the Friday afternoon, ends up shooting 80 in the second round, costs him his chance at that Open Championship. Doesn't play in 2015, has that accident when he was playing football. So he is going to St Andrews feeling he has a point to prove there. And if it's a links championship, it's an open championship, if the wind blows, it can become very difficult and a little bit of lottery. And again, you can end up on the wrong side of the draw. But if the conditions are calm, his driving won't be as big an issue. Like St Andrews can be wide open in parts, so he can tone it down a little bit. He'll get away with his misses a little bit more. And if his wedge game and his putting is as good as it is right now, in less than a month's time, McIlroy is going to have an unbelievable opportunity to win that Open Championship at St Andrews.
It seems like the safest money in golf now is to put it on Rory top 10 at a major. Just don't back him to win.
This feels different, and this entire year has felt differently. He's contended in all three majors. He felt like a factor in this tournament. I felt yesterday was the first time he'd gone into the final round of a major, probably since 2014, where he didn't really need to shoot a low number to go and win it. Now it turned out in hindsight, because scoring was a bit better. He shot a 69 yesterday. He was under par yesterday, but he would have needed he finished on 200. So he would have needed a 65 even to get into a playoff, which was probably never out there for him. But that it was going to be a bit of a scrap, and he was right there, and he just needed to hang tough and not let too many shots get away from him. But the 3 bogeys on the front nine meant he just had left himself with way too much to do. But yeah, I don't think you can be overly critical of how McIlroy played on an incredibly punishing golf course. He stuck at it. Nobody can question his B game, his ability to grind, that the head drops, the shoulder slump. None of that was there over this weekend. He stuck at it right till the very end. And I think if he sorts out his driving, it's remarkable that we're saying if he sorts out his driving, for a decade we thought Rory McIlroy was the greatest driver we'd ever seen, but that just seems to be a little bit off. He just needs to find a way of getting it all to come together on the same week of a major championship, and maybe St Andrews' 150th Open Championship. Hopefully for Rory, that'll be the one.
Seamus Power, T12, $359,000, I think, is what somebody who finishes 12th gets for the US Open.
It's not bad going. And yeah, Seamus Power, 71, 70, 70, 70. Model of consistency over the 4 days. And this is what he's doing now. He is a regular in and around the top of leaderboard on PGA Tour events, week on week at major championships. Like, it's such a life-changing 12 months for Seamus Power, from a guy who, you know, it's fair to describe as a journeyman. That's what he was. He was scrapping for his card constantly, you know, always in and around that 125th mark when you're going for your tour card for the next year, and goes on a run of consistency in the middle of the last summer, gets a victory out of it, secures his card. And there's some players, then they rest, then they go, finally I can relax a little bit, and they sort of take their card and they find themselves right back at square one again 18 months later. Seamus Power has just kicked on. The confidence that has given him, the fact that he's not thinking about money, he's not thinking about world ranking points every single week, just seems to have enabled him to bring his game to a whole other level. I haven't seen the world ranking this morning, but you know, he must be in and around, certainly heading for top 35, top 30 in the world. He's going to be back here next week. He's playing in the Irish Open, so I'm sure he's going to have a huge crowd. Shane Lowry is going to be playing as well. No Rory McIlroy at the Irish Open, but like Power, it's going to be such a different experience for Seamus Power. He hasn't played a huge amount of Irish Opens through the years because he's been based in America, and you know, he couldn't afford really to miss out on a tournament the week of the Irish Open. Like, he is going to have a crowd. Only Shane Lowry will have a bigger crowd following him than Seamus Power next week, so it's going to be a very, very special homecoming for him.
Shifty Lad has been in touch to say, I want to see Galway versus Kilkenny in the final. Handshake Gate would be a big narrative to that game. And he's also said, morning lads, really enjoyed the two games yesterday, and on TV having the hill to the right look great, as it didn't look as near empty because of the angle. Matt Fitz was so good too. Love his caddy, Billy Foster, getting a lot of love. 40 years in the bag, he finally gets a major win.
I'd say that the post-tournament interviews, and I think they do mean something when they think back to, say, Bryson DeChambeau winning and thanking his sponsors as the first thing he did after winning a major championship. Like, it's embarrassing.
The bottle.
This is not what you dream about. There was some great interviews with his family, and his dad was almost happier for Billy Foster than he was for his own son, because Billy Foster has caddied for some of the greatest players in the world, from Seve Ballesteros to Lee Westwood, and never got that major championship, and finally got it through Matt Fitzpatrick. And there was a brilliant moment at the end where Matt Fitzpatrick's brother Alex is a brilliant golfer as well, top amateur turning pro, not quite I think at the level maybe of where Matt is, but you know, should go on and have a good career, where he ran over and he basically gave Matt a tap on the back on the green when they ran on, and he ran straight over to Will Zalatoris to commiserate with him. They both went to college together. I think they played college golf together, but everything about it was just, you know, classy touches all round from the Fitzpatrick family, and it, like, the emotion of it was great. I didn't know there was that side to Matt Fitzpatrick, so yeah, he looks like someone who's going to go and enjoy those celebrations.
Seamus Power is up from 41st in the world to 36th. So I think it was the start of the year, we were obviously talking quite a lot about him getting into the top 50, so he's really delivered on that and rocketed up the standings once again. So 36th in the world for Seamus Power after his top 12 finish at the weekend, level with John Ram at the end of play last night.
Big disappointment actually of the week, I think, was John Ram. Certainly of the final round. Like, remember 18, he's got a one-shot lead when he's going down 18 on Saturday night, and he, he's too ambitious out of the fairway bunker, hits the lip, comes back in, ends up taking double bogey. So Ram, you thought, shot back, you know, just such a great opportunity to go back-to-back at the US Open, and nothing happened from it all yesterday. So, you know, Seamus Power finishing on that. Like, Seamus Power's never played at the Open Championship, so he's going there next month to St Andrews as well. So it's, yeah, it's all good for Seamus Power right now.
Let's circle back to what Shifty Lad was saying in the comments there. The Tailteann Cup, they made a better job of it on television, it felt, than the round 4 qualifiers the previous week. There was essentially the same amount of people in the ground, but it felt like more of an occasion yesterday.
It felt like that's common sense. Like, it's a trick of the light in many ways, but I flicked on to the first match yesterday and was like, bloody hell, there's a big crowd at this. But what they simply did was they put pretty much everybody in the Hogan stand on the lower tier. That's all you could see for the vast majority of the TV coverage, and it felt as though probably having everybody together also created a better atmosphere than a week ago. And yesterday was a real success story for the Tailteann Cup. Is 16,000 a big crowd? Is it not a big crowd when there's 4 teams winning? I'm not sure it is, but the quality of football, like, so often when we see these teams go to Croke Park, you know, a Westmeath, they're playing against Dublin, and the players don't get to express themselves at all. They have to set up with a game plan that's ultra defensive, that's just try and protect themselves. Yet they go out yesterday, and it's the quality of points that they kicked throughout. Like you're looking at Westmeath, which is probably what you want from the Tailteann Cup, saying, why are these guys in the Tailteann Cup? Why are they in this scenario where they're in the Tailteann Cup? Because there just seemed to be so much talent there. And the first game, the Cavan-Sligo game, was one of the best games I've watched all year in Gaelic football. The attacking football, Cavan almost scored a goal. It was a brilliant save from the keeper in the end, just before half-time. It was the last play before half-time where they went from one end of the pitch to the other, 5-6 passes. It would have been one of the goals of the season if it had gone in. And yeah, both games were real attacking football. Cavan were much the better side, but just before half-time, Sligo had several goal chances. They hit the crossbar. There was a clearance off the line that if they got them, maybe it was a very different game. But this is what you want the Tailteann Cup to be. Evenly matched sides where the skillful players, the attacking players, can do what they're meant to do, what I'm sure they do at club level all the time. Why they've got to this stage where they're playing inter-county, where they have this ridiculous talent, and we rarely see it. Again, if you're Sligo, I know Cavan's a slightly different scenario where they've won a provincial title recently, but how often do we see Sligo players on national TV playing with the freedom that they played with yesterday? Generally, if you see them at all, they're up against Mayo or Galway or Roscommon, where they know they're the underdog, where they might kick 10, 12 points at most during a game. Like, for them, it must be just such a game changer to have matches like this.
Yeah, and even when you've got those gems of players in those weaker teams, when they're getting hammered, you just don't pay any attention to them. And I think a lot of people have been very familiar with the Cavan team as a result of what happened in 2020, but I think yesterday was a bit of an exhibition for Sligo, and to a lesser degree maybe some of the players playing in the second match as well. It's not what it's about. They want to get a trophy. I think Westmeath beating Cavan in the final will be a bit of an upset as well, but it should be a cracker of a game. Just very finally then, the last in our performance rankings this morning is Dundalk, who have turned this thing on its head to a certain degree, but there's going to be no runaway title winner in the League of Ireland Premier Division just yet anyway.
No. So we had a clash of the top two on Friday night at Oriel Park. Shamrock Rovers, who went into the game with an 8-point lead over Dundalk. So Rovers win that game. They're 11 points clear at the top, and the title race is pretty much done at a perfect time for Shamrock Rovers, because they're starting the European campaign in the next fortnight. They're going to have matches week on week, it seems. So you think they can suddenly rotate their squad whatever way they want. Dundalk get the victory. Robbie Benson, sensational goal, cross from Macari. Lou Macari's grandson playing for Dundalk had this brilliant cross on the right hand side. Robbie Benson smashes it in with a volley, and suddenly Dundalk are 5 points back with a game in hand, and they are the team with all the momentum. Shamrock Rovers have lost 4 times in their opening 20 games. They've lost their last 2 away matches, both of them up in Louth against Dundalk and Drogheda, and now they've this very cramped fixture list as well. Whereas Dundalk have won their last 5 matches. I think they've 22 points out of the last 24 since they were beaten by Shamrock Rovers in Tallaght. And I remember that night looking at Dundalk and thinking, it's Stephen O'Donnell's first year in charge. There's clearly some signs that they're making progress, but they're a long way away. Like next season, the season after, maybe then they can compete with Shamrock Rovers. But Dundalk don't have European football and can rest players, and they have momentum. Rovers have Bohemians, which is obviously one of the biggest games of the season, at what's going to be a sold-out Tallaght on Friday night. Dundalk, over the next 4 or 5 games, the fixture list certainly looks quite tempting for them. And as good as it is to have a great team in the League of Ireland, such as Shamrock Rovers, like the best thing for the league and promotion of the league is a title race. And it's not that long ago, but since Dundalk and Shamrock Rovers, there was a proper old rivalry there. So if Dundalk can maintain this, I think for the league in general, it's a good thing. But 5 points behind, still a bit of a gap for Shamrock Rovers.
Yeah, and Derry City, of course, drew with Drogheda United on Friday as well to lose a little bit of pace.
Yeah, Derry collapsed pretty much over the last 6-7 weeks.
For sure. So they're away to UCD on Friday. It's Rovers against Bows, as you mentioned, on Friday, and Dundalk are away to Shells. So, Dundalk in the green this morning, and that concludes this morning's Gillette Labs Performance Rankings.
OTB AM's Performance Rankings with Gillette.